Garcia. I'm the executive director for a nonprofit called Border Angels. I'm also an immigration lawyer and a DACA recipient, which means that I came to the U.S. over 30 years ago, but I still haven't been able to adjust my status from undocumented to legal permanent resident. When my family came in 1987, there was no line for us to fall behind. There are no applications for me to fill in to become a legal permanent resident. There is just no path to citizenship for me. And like me, there are over 107,000 DACA recipients in the U.S. right now whose lives are in limbo. But I am an immigration lawyer. That's the irony of it. I do practice here in San Diego County. And a lot of the work that Border Angels does is here regional in San Diego County as well, in our borderlands. One of our biggest challenges right now with COVID-19 is assisting the shelters. There just isn't help right now in combination with the policies that are coming down from the administration. It has become increasingly more difficult for folks in Tijuana to access resources. So one of the things that this administration has done is, in its anti-immigrant agenda, has refused to accept asylum seekers in the U.S. and instead it's telling them to wait in line in Tijuana, so and along the border. In Tijuana specifically, there's over 15,000 people that have enrolled in this MPP program, the Remain in Mexico program, and they're in about 30 shelters in Tijuana. Given the COVID-19 and the closing of the border because of the pandemic, the resources and the help from the various organizations, including churches that are going to Tijuana to assist, are no longer going to take donations there. Border Angels has stopped its caravan of love, where we would meet every 2 weeks in the San Diego side of the border and we would drive over donations to Tijuana. We have stopped that caravan because of the traveling restrictions. However, Border Angels is one of the few organizations still supporting the shelters in Tijuana. We have been able to provide monetary assistance, which has been challenging given a lot of the restrictions of money transfers from the U.S. to individuals in Tijuana. But we've been able to assist to ensure that a lot of those shelters are not missing food and basic medicines, fever reducers, things like that. But some of these shelters that are housing our migrants or asylum seekers, they do not have access to medical care. So there is one other organization in Tijuana that is made up of primarily volunteer doctors that are going to the various shelters to provide the support, and we have been supporting those doctors as well. They've created hand washing stations, and they've been able to provide those to I think now 15 shelters in there every week, providing more. So that's some of the work that's getting done in Tijuana. There's still a great need right now, but we can definitely use more support in those efforts. We think that things are going to get really bad in the next few weeks in Tijuana, given that Mexico does not support its workers the same way that the U.S. supports its workers. There's not going to be a stimulus package. There's not going to be the medical care that as needed as it's been here in the U.S. is going to be worse in Mexico. And so that's our biggest fear right now. And so we're getting all these shelters in preparation for the pandemic to hit Tijuana. We've been providing washers and dryers for some of the shelters to make sure that they have the ability to maintain things as clean as possible, and ensuring that we stock their pantries with food and medicine. But there's still work there to be done on the medical side as well. Another thing that Border Angels is doing here in the U.S. side of the border is that, in collaboration with other organizations that make up another org called San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium, we, as members of the coalition and serving on the advisory board of this, consortium. We have donated $25,000 to be able to provide $500 grants to undocumented people in San Diego County. As you know, the stimulus packet that's coming from the federal system does not include people that file taxes and pay and contribute taxes, such as my parents that have been paying for decades into the system using an ITIN number, a tax individual number. They are not going to be getting this stimulus packet. Only people that are that have the ability to work lawfully and therefore obtained a social security number or U.S. citizens are going to be able to take advantage of this. But DACA recipients will also be able to obtain the $1,200 stimulus check. But many folks in San Diego County in particular, our street vendors, for example, will not be able to benefit from the stimulus package. So in collaboration with other organizations, San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium has created a fund to help workers here in San Diego County, and Border Angels has been donating to that fund. But again, we also need more support with that. Today, the governor of California announced a big packet of $125 million. We don't know how that's going to get dispersed, but that is supposed to be going to people that are undocumented and cannot access other resources except for this fund. So that's great news. There is more help coming and more information to be transmitted to our public in the next few weeks. So we'll be in tune for that. But across the nation, that's unheard of, right? California is leading in immigrant rights, and we hope that other states take those initiatives. But across the U.S., a lot of people that are undocumented are still being left out of these conversations and still needing a lot of help, and are of the most vulnerable population because they already have a great fear of accessing public benefits, a great fear of even going to the emergency room. As an immigration lawyer, I keep getting these calls, even from students in college that say, I need to go to the emergency room, but I'm afraid of being deported. Or I'm afraid of accessing the food banks because I think it's going to affect my immigration case. And a lot of it is given the right information to folks, but this administration has done such a good job in scaring our folks, in creating fear in our community, that they are afraid of accessing the resources even when they're entitled to them. So that's a big challenge, is for our community organizations to provide the right information to folks so that they feel comfortable enough accessing the resources that they are entitled to. So that's another big challenge that we're having here on the border, that from the first day that the federal government, the president announced the shutting of the border and that we would be practicing isolation or social distancing, we saw ICE raid houses here in Los Angeles, and we certainly feel it here in San Diego with the checkpoints every day. So people are living in fear of being caught and deported, and therefore have a fear of accessing resources. And I imagine that that's likely the case not just here in California but along our borderlands. So that's another challenge that we have. And so Border Angels, we have gone remote, but at the same time we're very active and putting out the right information out there for folks to have not only information on the resources, but for them to have the right information as to when it's safe to access these various resources. Another big challenge with that is the bond funds. Border Angels created a bond fund to be able to provide and post the immigration bonds that are asked of people that are in our detention centers. So as an example of what we have been seeing commonly is that folks that would remain in the Remaining Mexico program for 7 or 9 or 12 months in Tijuana, then they are placed in a detention center here in the U.S. and then eventually released as the case progresses through the courts, if they're able to pay for a bond or are paroled. What we're seeing is a common bond placed of $5,000 for people that have suffered the worst of traumas. We had a bond that we placed for a woman whose husband had been killed, her child had been killed, her father had been killed, and she was asking for asylum. And she was put in a detention center, and only after 3 months, when we became involved and paid for this bond, was she able to be released from the detention center, which is a for-profit. It's run by corporations that are doing it for profit. These are federal prisons run by corporations that are making a profit of every single person that's in there. In Otay Mesa Detention Center last year, they actually created more space to be able to house more people so that they can have a bigger profit. And so one of the challenges with COVID-19 has been that we have been trying really hard to post bonds for folks, but they are put in isolation and in quarantine, and therefore our bonds are being denied. And that has been a great challenge, and it has required a lot of mobilizing by our community, not just here in San Diego County, but all around the U.S., for folks to pressure the governor and other news media outlets and social media and community members to put pressure on ICE to release these folks. And today we were successful to place 3 bonds for 3 asylum seekers. The total for the 3 bonds were $13,000. So the money itself is a challenge. And then with coronavirus, that increases, it makes it a lot more difficult for us to be able to place these bonds, because they are put in what they call a cohort, where they are quarantined for at least 14 days. And if there's any new cases of positive testing in those units, then the 14-day clock resets. And so we were lucky today to be able to bond 3 folks after so much work that was done to release them. And again, these are asylum seekers that have already lived through so much in their home countries, and have done everything that we've been asking them to do to qualify for asylum and ask for asylum. So we think these challenges are going to still continue, if not become even more difficult, with this administration, who has chosen to deport folks that could not wait in the MPP program, and instead decided to cross the desert or the mountains or the rivers and were caught. If that was the case, normally under other circumstances, the U.S. would put them in a detention center and continue to process our cases. This administration has said, because of the pandemic, they are now being deported to their home countries, and Mexico doesn't want them. So they're being sent back to the countries that they're fleeing from. Again, these folks are asking for asylum because our home countries have been unable to protect them for one reason or another. And so that's the really heartbreaking situation, is that we're seeing people that are the most vulnerable people knocking at our doors, doing the right thing, doing it as we often hear, follow the rules. They're doing all of that, and then we're still sending them back to danger. And so those are the just to highlight some of the things that we're encountering, difficulties that we are encountering in our border. The other big program that we have is our water drop program. Now, people more than ever think that this is the chance for them to cross, and so they're still attempting to cross through the mountains and the deserts, and it's still very dangerous for them to do so. And given the coronavirus precautions that we're taking, we have stopped our public water drops, where we would host 60 to 100 people in these events to drop water. Now we're only doing it with our own team internally, not open to the public. And our water drop team has been going to the desert every single weekend and dropping strategically water in the desert, and looking for areas of consumption and tracking where the patterns of migration are. Unfortunately, since the MPP program started, and really since the last few years, we've seen more and more that we find items belonging to children. And so we know that there are families crossing. We see diapers and toys and indications of families attempting to make this crossing. And so that's another very terrifying thing that we're experiencing, is that because of our policies, we're pushing people to cross through the most difficult and harshest ways of crossing, and we're doing so even though we know that there are families crossing, and otherwise we give them the choice of waiting in Tijuana for months. And in Tijuana, again, the shelters are already at capacity. And so it's been very difficult and challenging to do this work here at the border, but it would not be made possible if not for our volunteers and the people that support us, that donate, for us to be able to do all of these different activities and collaboration and efforts. So that's the silver lining in all of this, is that there is so much help, so much support, and so many people wanting to get involved, whether it's sending over masks, whether it's sending over hand sanitizer or other supplies, or sending monetary support. That has been an incredible help, or just staying informed. A lot of people just go to our website, borderangels.org, and sign on to the newsletter, and then they are informed of what's happening, because I think that's how we're going to win this thing, is by everybody knowing, being aware of what's happening, so then we can mobilize folks, whether it's picking up the phone and making a phone call to your governor or to your representatives, and push for policies that are more inclusive of our immigrant family. So that's the silver lining, that there are so many people wanting to get involved, and we know that there's hope because of that. So with that, I want to thank everyone that supports not just Border Angels, but supports other organizations across the U.S. that are doing amazing work in pushing for more humanitarian, more comprehensive laws that are reflective of who we really are, and not of the policies that are coming from this administration. So thank you.